Chapter 1. The doll in the window. Oliver had walked down this street countless times. He knew every storefront, every cafe, every little boutique that lined the sidewalk. He had a nearly photographic memory of these blocks, from the cracked pavement near the bus stop to the overgrown ivy creeping up the brick of the used bookstore. But today, something was wrong. A shop he had never seen before now stood between the vintage bookstore and a boutique filled with handcrafted jewellery. It looked as though it had always been there, nestled snugly between its neighbours, its pastel pink and white sign gleaming under the soft glow of its outdoor lanterns. Custom made, the sign read in elegant, curling script. It gave off the aura of something carefully cultivated, something timeless, yet he was certain it hadn't been there yesterday. The display window caught his eye first. Inside, seated on a delicate chair with a lace-trimmed cushion, was a ball-jointed doll, unlike any he had ever seen. She was exquisite, her form almost unnervingly lifelike. Long golden pigtails cascaded in thick curls down her shoulders, her wide, glassy pink eyes sparkling under the shop's warm lighting. She was dressed in a frilly Lolita dress, layers of lace and ribbon accentuating her delicate jointed limbs. The craftsmanship was flawless too flawless. But something about her felt wrong. Oliver couldn't place why, but as he stared, a chill ran down his spine. There was something uncanny about her posture, about the way her small, sculpted fingers rested so delicately in her lap. And then he saw it. A detail so small that he almost dismissed it at first. Her face looked familiar, the delicate curve of her jaw, the shape of her nose, the slight part of her lips, as though she were just about to speak. His own reflection in the glass blurred against her image, and for a split second, his heart pounded. She looked like him. Oliver took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. His arms crossed over his chest, rubbing away the sudden chill that had settled over him. The longer he looked, the more he convinced himself he was imagining things. It was just a doll, just a strange trick of the lighting. And yet, a strange pull settled in his stomach, an unsettling curiosity. It felt like his feet moved forward of their own accord. The bell above the door jingled softly as he pushed it open. The air inside smelled faintly of vanilla and antique wood, a strangely pleasant but cloying mix. The soft golden light inside cast everything in an amber glow, making the room feel warm, almost nostalgic. The walls were lined with display cases, filled with dolls of all kinds, elegant, intricate, their glassy eyes staring forward in silent observation. Some were dressed in elaborate Victorian ensembles, others in delicate lace-trimmed nightgowns. The further he stepped inside, the more they seemed to watch him. As he moved down the aisle, he realized the level of detail in each doll was staggering. Every painted lash, every individual freckle carefully placed. Some had pearls sewn into their dresses, tiny embroidered initials stitched into their lace cuffs. Their craftsmanship was beyond anything he had ever seen. A soft shiver crawled up his spine. Why did they all look so real? He ran his fingers over the glass of a display case, eyes locked on a doll, dressed in an elaborate crimson ball gown. Its wide painted lips seemed to part in an almost imperceptible smile. Was it just the lighting, or had its head tilted slightly? Welcome, welcome. Oliver turned to the sound of a voice, and his breath hitched. The woman who approached him looked as though she had stepped right out of a fairy tale. She wore an elaborate pastel pink Lolita dress with delicate lace trim, layers of frills cascading down to her knees. Her soft curls were the colour of spun sugar, perfectly styled, not a hair out of place. Wide, doll-like eyes framed by long lashes gleamed with excitement as she clasped her hands together, her every movement graceful, poised unnervingly perfect. "You're just in time," she said, her voice sweet as sugar, light as air. "I was hoping you'd stop by." Oliver blinked. "What?" She giggled, a melodic chiming sound. "Oh, don't look so surprised. I've been waiting for you." His stomach twisted. "Waiting for me? I don't even know this store." Her head tilted, a smile dancing at the edges of her lips. "Oh, but you do. You just don't remember yet." Something in the way she said it made the back of his neck prickle. Oliver's instinct screamed at him to leave, and yet his feet remained planted. The dollmaker took a slow step forward, hands folded neatly in front of her, as if assessing him. "It's all right," she murmured, her voice honeyed and warm. "You've already come inside. You're curious, aren't you?" Oliver swallowed hard. I was just looking." His own voice sounded small, That's how it always starts, she said playfully, her fingers lacing together as she watched him with an expression of quiet amusement. But don't worry, I only make perfect things. Her eyes flickered past him, sweeping over the shelves filled with pristine dolls. Every one of them has a story, you know, she continued, her tone light, conversational. Some were made just for display. Others were created for a purpose. Something about the way she said it made his skin prickle. The dolls in the cases loomed around him, silent, pristine, waiting. Oliver took another step back. Oh dear. The dollmaker sighed, tilting her head as though disappointed. No need to be afraid, you're just a little early. Oliver's throat felt dry. Early? She only smiled, and before he could react, the door clicked shut behind him. Chapter 2. A perfect fit. Oliver's breath hitched as the soft click of the door locking behind him sent a prickle down his spine. The air inside the shop suddenly felt thicker, the warmth from its golden lighting now bordering on stifling. He turned toward the door, but the dollmaker's voice light, honeyed, far too close drew his attention back. There's no need to be nervous. Her smile was too knowing, her wide, doll-like eyes gleaming with something just beyond his comprehension. She lifted her hands in a delicate motion, as if presenting herself for inspection. You're not lost, are you? Oliver hesitated. His gut twisted with an undeniable urge to leave, but his feet remained planted. His tongue felt thick in his mouth as he forced a nervous chuckle. No, I was just looking. The dollmaker's head tilted, soft curls bouncing slightly with the movement. Ah, but you've already done that, haven't you? She gestured toward the rows of glass cases filled with eerily perfect dolls, their vacant eyes catching the light just enough to create an unsettling gleam. Oliver swallowed hard. Something was wrong with this place, and yet his feet didn't move. Why wasn't he moving? Come, she said, her tone laced with something gentle yet firm, like a teacher addressing a child. You came inside for a reason, didn't you? Oliver wasn't sure if he had or not. He had convinced himself it was just curiosity, but the way she spoke made him question everything. It was as if she knew something he didn't. Still, his pulse pounded against his ribs as he let her guide him further into the store. The shop's cozy charm vanished the moment they stepped past an archway lined with lace curtains. The walls here were stark white, the overhead light brighter, clinical, casting long, sterile shadows across the polished wooden floor. But it wasn't empty. All around the room, shelves lined with intricately organized tools made it clear that this space was far more than just a simple fitting room. It was a workshop. Spools of silk ribbon hung neatly along the walls, their pastel hues reflecting under the glow of the overhead light. Glass jars filled with tiny decorative beads, lace appliques, and delicate fabric flowers sat on rows of narrow shelves. Along the far wall, a rack held several meticulously crafted doll outfits, but these were too large for any ordinary doll. On a nearby workbench, sketches and stencils of ball-jointed dolls were pinned beneath glass weights, some featuring elaborate articulated hands, slender necks, and wide, delicate eyes. A series of delicate, articulated limbs rested in a wooden tray eerily lifelike, as though awaiting assembly. At the centre of the room stood a large, full-length mirror framed in ornate silver filigree, its glass so pristine that Oliver could see every detail of his own face down to the way his brow creased with growing unease. Behind him, the dollmaker watched his reflection instead of him. Lovely, she murmured, stepping around him with a measured grace, her fingers laced behind her back. Yes, you'll do perfectly. Oliver stiffened. For what? She giggled soft, airy, like chimes in a summer breeze. A fitting, of course. His eyes darted around the room. Fitting for what? The tailor's tools, the carefully arranged patterns, it all seemed so precise, so methodical. The tiny painted mannequins, some missing heads or limbs, sent a fresh wave of unease crawling up his spine. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he started, trying to keep his voice even. I should go. He turned, ready to move back toward the exit. But his legs didn't move. A slow, creeping chill spread through his limbs as a realization clawed its way into his mind. He couldn't move. His breathing quickened. He tried to lift his arm, shift his weight, anything but his body refused to obey. He was rooted in place, his muscles unresponsive, his body foreign to him. The dollmaker hummed, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear. Yes, I think we'll start with your measurements. Oliver wanted to scream, to ask her what was happening, but his throat felt locked in place. His chest still rose and fell with each panic breath, but his body refused to react beyond that. The sensation was impossible, as though his limbs no longer belonged to him, as though the connection between his thoughts and his muscles had been severed. She approached with unhurried elegance, drawing a measuring tape from the pocket of her apron, its delicate silver filigree catching the light. She measured his shoulders first, fingers brushing against his skin like a seamstress working on fabric rather than a person. Yes, she mused, pulling the tape down his arms, fingers adjusting their position as though testing the rigidity of a mannequin's limb. A little long here, but we can fix that. Oliver's breath stuttered in his chest. Fix that? She took his wrist next, carefully tilting it to inspect its shape. His fingers didn't move, even as she manipulated them slightly, as though she were studying the articulation of a sculpted joint. We'll need to refine these too, she murmured, taking a step back to examine him fully. Don't worry, dear, you're coming along beautifully. Oliver's heart pounded as he looked at his reflection. Was it just the angle? Or did his limbs look thinner? More delicate? No, that was impossible. And yet, the longer he stared, the less familiar his body seemed. His posture had changed, unnaturally poised, his shoulders resting just a little too gracefully. His fingers, the very ones the dollmaker had just touched, looked slimmer, more sculpted in the reflection. His stomach churned. He had to get out. His mind screamed at him to move, but his body remained obedient only to her touch. She returned the measuring tape to her pocket and tilted her head, studying him as if considering an unfinished work of art. Yes, she breathed, sounding delighted. You'll be perfect soon. Oliver wanted to protest, to demand an explanation, but the words refused to form. His own reflection, still subtly shifting, seemed to mock him a faint glimmer of something softening, something not quite human anymore. The dollmaker reached out and, with feather-light fingertips, brushed the curve of his cheek. Oliver shivered, but not from cold. Something in him stirred, tightened, changed, and the dollmaker smiled. Now, she said, taking a step back, let's move on to the fun part. The lights above dimmed slightly, casting the room in an even softer glow. The mirror in front of him seemed sharper now, more alive, as though it were holding its breath right alongside him. Oliver's chest rose and fell, his breath coming shallow, uncertain. And the dollmaker began. Chapter 3. Fragile things. Oliver's breath came shallow, uneven, the soft hum of the dollmaker's presence suffocating him in ways he couldn't describe. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, to push past her, to flee from this uncanny place filled with its eerie tools and delicate, too-perfect garments. But his body wouldn't listen. His legs stood rigid, poised as though they were no longer his own. His arms hung at his sides, hands relaxed too, relaxed fingers curled into a delicately posed position rather than clenched in the fear that twisted his gut. He could still breathe, still feel the weight of his own body, but it wasn't responding. The dollmaker took a step closer, the soft click of her Mary Janes against the polished floor sending another pulse of panic through him. Shh, she soothed, reaching out with gentle, cool fingers to brush a strand of hair from his forehead. No need to fret, my dear. You're adjusting beautifully. Adjusting? What the hell did that mean? Oliver tried to pull back, but his body remained obedient to her touch. The mirror behind her captured every inch of him. His reflection was still his own, wasn't it? But no, something wasn't right. His posture was too elegant, his shoulders slightly drawn back, his stance too carefully balanced. And his hands, his fingers looked thinner, more refined, as if their natural shape had been softened into something artificial. His proportions felt wrong. His torso felt lighter, as if it had subtly shortened, while his limbs, were they longer? He sucked in a sharp breath, panic blooming in his chest. What are you doing to me? The dollmaker only smiled, stepping back as if to admire her work. Your structure is coming along well, but, she tapped her chin in thought, you're still a little clumsy, aren't you? Oliver wanted to argue, to scream that he wasn't anything she said he was, but as soon as he tried to shift his weight, his knee buckled backward. Not forward, backward. The sensation was instant wrong, unnatural, like a mannequin whose joint had given out. His balance wavered and he barely had time to react before his ankle twisted unnaturally, his foot slipping against the smooth floor. He fell. But it wasn't like falling normally. There was no pain, no real impact. Instead, there was an odd, hollow feeling, like his body had lost something fundamental. His arms flailed to catch himself, but they felt too light, too insubstantial. Crack. His wrist hit the floor first, and his hand immediately went slack. A sharp gasp tore from his throat. He tried to move his fingers to flex them, but they wouldn't respond. His wrist wasn't attached anymore. He turned his head in a desperate panic, expecting to see blood, expecting to see the sickening sight of bone jutting from torn flesh. But instead, there was nothing. His hand had snapped clean off at the wrist, but worse than that, his fingers had shattered. Where they had once been, delicate, broken nubs remained, jagged at the edges like the fractured joints of a porcelain doll. The sight of it made bile rise in his throat. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. The dollmaker clicked her tongue. Oh dear. I told you to be careful. She knelt beside him with a calm, practiced ease, picking up the broken remnants of his fingers, inspecting them with mild curiosity before setting them aside like discarded parts. That won't do at all, she murmured. You're still adjusting. But don't worry. Dear will fix you right up. Oliver's breath came in panicked gasps, his mind reeling. Fix? Fix how? With a smooth motion, the dollmaker lifted his limp, disconnected wrist and set it aside as if it had always been detachable. She reached into a nearby drawer, withdrawing something new, something pristine. A replacement. The new hand was dainty, pre-posed, the fingers curled slightly in a delicate, ornamental way. Unlike his old hand, there was no real articulation in the fingers, only at the knuckle, where it connected to the wrist. She aligned it carefully, pressed it into place. Click. A shudder tore through Oliver's body as sensation flooded the new hand instantly. He could feel through it, as though it had always been his. But something was wrong. He tried to flex his fingers. They didn't move, not the way he wanted. Only the joints at the knuckles obeyed him, curling delicately, primly graceful, but useless. The rest of the fingers remained perfectly sculpted, trapped in a pose that was not his own. The dollmaker gave his reattached hand a light pat. Much better. We'll make the rest of you match soon. Oliver was trembling. What are you doing to me? She merely tilted her head. Making you better. Oliver's breath came in panicked gasps, his mind reeling. New bodies? No, this wasn't happening. She took his forearm in one hand, lifting his limp, disconnected wrist with the other. Then, with the smooth precision of someone handling a delicate antique, she aligned the joint back into place. Click. A shudder tore through Oliver's body as he felt his hand reattach. The moment it was secured, sensation returned, his fingers responding again, but they curled delicately, posed just so, like a doll's hand positioned for display. He tried to flex his fingers into a fist he couldn't. His breath hitched. He could move them, but only in ways that looked pretty, graceful, delicate. The dollmaker smiled, giving his reattached hand a light pat. There we are. Good as new. Oliver was trembling. What are you doing to me? She merely tilted her head. Making you better. His stomach twisted violently. The mirror across the room reflected a figure that wasn't quite him anymore. His arms looked too smooth, too refined, his movements subtly unnatural, his joints poised with an elegance that wasn't his own. His legs still wobbled beneath him, unstable, as though they weren't yet fully his to control. The more he tried to regain his balance, the more gracefully unnatural his stance became. And his hands, they weren't his hands anymore. He choked back a breath, the weight of realization pressing crushingly over him. His body was changing, piece by piece, and he was helpless to stop it. He wanted to run to break free, to get out of this shop and never look back. But his legs refused to move. Chapter 4. A doll's face. Oliver's breath hitched as the dollmaker's fingers trailed along his jawline, tilting his head slightly. Her eyes gleamed with something unreadable, the same fascinated focus she had when arranging the delicate lace on a display dress. We're so close now, she murmured, voice sweet, too sweet. But there's still something missing. Her fingers traced up to his temple, brushing through his hair with a thoughtful hum. Oliver's stomach twisted. I think, she said, gripping a handful of his hair, this needs to go. No. No. A horrible sensation washed over him as she pulled. His hair didn't tug at his scalp. It didn't rip. Instead, it lifted, separating cleanly from his head, with a soft suctioning pop. Oliver's guttural scream never made it past his lips. His head felt lighter. Too light. Too smooth. A cold draft kissed his exposed scalp, and he realized in silent horror that the back of his head wasn't skin anymore. It was plastic. He tried to twist away, to shake off the rising panic, but his neck held stiffly in place, locked in perfect posture. The dollmaker turned his detached hairpiece over in her hands, examining it like a discarded accessory. "Oh, don't look so distressed, dear, it's only natural." She set it aside with a sigh, then reached behind his head, fingertips pressing into something unseen. There was a click. A new sensation, one that shouldn't have been possible. Something detached. Oliver felt air inside his head. A breeze, cool and surreal, drifted through the empty space where the back of his skull had once been. His mind reeled, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Then, fingers. The dollmaker's fingers inside his head. He felt her nails brush against something, not brain, not bone, but the hollow, plastic interior of his reshaped skull. He could feel her adjusting something, shifting the delicate framework that now supported his existence. A soft, slick pop, then another, and darkness. For a moment, Oliver thought he had blacked out, but no, the rest of his body still functioned. He could still feel the weight of himself, the subtle shifts of his arms, his rigid back, but his vision was gone. Something warm and wet slithered down his cheeks. Were his eyes bleeding? Was he crying? What did she do? Then he felt it, a delicate pressure as something was plucked from him. Not like tearing, not like pain, just a simple, careful removal. He felt his own eyes leave him. The absence of sight was now complete. There was no perception, no light behind his eyelids, just an empty, eternal nothing. His entire world was now defined by touch and sound. The soft hum of the dollmaker's contented breath, the rustling of fabric, the chilling, clinical clink of tools being gathered. What was she doing? A sudden pressure pressed into his empty sockets, like the dull edge of a blade teasing against his new plastic skin. Then, a new sound. A horrible, unbearable scraping. A slow, dragging rasp of metal against plastic. Oliver would have writhed if he could, would have screamed. But all he could do was sit frozen in silence as the dollmaker carved into him. He felt it, the shaving away of his eye sockets, the tightening of his skin as the shape of his face subtly adjusted beneath her careful hands. It was as if she were carving him like a sculptor would a doll's face, refining the openings, making them just a little bigger, a little rounder, a little wider. Each pass of the blade sent an eerie vibration through his hollow skull. He could hear it, the way the plastic grated against the tool, the way she worked with measured precision. She was deliberate, methodical, patient. And worst of all, his body didn't resist. His body didn't fight it. It allowed it, accepted it. His chest heaved, his panic spiraling. "I'm running out of time." And then, a click, a shift, the pressure released, and vision returned. But something was wrong. His sight was clearer, sharper, unnaturally bright. His peripherals caught every detail of the room in perfect precision. Colours seemed softer, more ethereal, and then he saw his reflection. His eyes were huge, larger, wider, round and glassy, with irises now a sparkling, vacant pink. He gasped, but even that felt different. His lips parted too smoothly, a softness in his jaw that wasn't there before. His face wasn't his own. The dollmaker ran her fingers over his cheek, as if admiring her work. "Much better," she cooed. "Now for the finishing touch." She turned, retrieving something soft and golden from a nearby stand. A wig. Oliver wanted to pull away, to shake his head, to fight, but his neck remained still, tilted in perfect compliance. She positioned the long, glossy blonde pigtails atop his head, curling and twisting them, just so. With one last adjustment, she stepped back. "Now, look at you." Oliver's heart pounded in horror. The reflection staring back at him was no longer his own. His face, his human face was gone. The soft pout of his lips, the delicate blush dusting his cheeks, the doll-like shimmer in his wide pink eyes, a painted, plastic, vacant version of himself looked back. The dollmaker's voice was soft, delighted. "There we are. Perfect." Chapter 5. A doll's body. Oliver's reflection was unrecognizable. The wide, sparkling pink eyes, the delicate curve of his newly sculpted lips, the way his porcelain-smooth skin caught the light with a faint shimmer. This wasn't his face. It was a crafted mask, painted to perfection. His chest heaved, but even that motion felt unnatural, his breath shallow and unnecessary. The dollmaker clapped her hands together with delight. "Oh, we're almost there!" But this won't do at all. Oliver's stomach twisted, though the sensation felt distant. What was left of his stomach? Was it even there anymore? His body had already changed so much. His hands, his eyes, his hair, his face, but something told him the worst was yet to come. The doll-maker reached for something on her workbench, a pair of polished silver scissors. Now, let's get rid of these. Oliver flinched, his body reacting on instinct, but his joints only allowed graceful, measured movements. There was no recoil, no sudden jerk of resistance, only a delicate shift, like a puppet awaiting its next command. The doll-maker pressed the cold metal of the scissors against the hem of his shirt, humming softly as she snipped through the fabric. Piece by piece, the remnants of his old clothes fell away, slipping to the floor in soft, useless scraps. His chest was now fully exposed, and there was nothing human left. Oliver gasped, his hands instinctively moving to cover himself, but even that motion wasn't his own. His arms lifted, posed as if he were modestly shielding his chest in an artist's sculpture. He hadn't moved them. They had moved for him. The doll-maker giggled, tilting her head. "Oh, don't be shy, sweet thing. You don't have anything to hide anymore. No imperfections, no flaws, just smooth, pristine plastic. Isn't that lovely?" She brushed her fingers over his bare shoulder, letting out a delighted hum. "I knew you'd be beautiful." His torso was smaller, more compact, his waist narrow and impossibly cinched. His once defined muscles had softened into smooth, sculpted curves. His shoulders were delicate, his arms thin, his hands positioned just so, fingers automatically curling into a dainty, fragile pose. His joints, they weren't real anymore. The seams along his wrists, his elbows, his shoulders, perfectly rounded ball joints, smooth and seamless. His breath hitched. No, no, no. He could feel it happening. His torso segmenting, hollowing out. His insides weren't organs, muscles, or bones anymore. They were empty space, held together by an unseen structure, something delicate yet unyielding. His legs elongated, the muscles of his thighs smoothing into delicate, refined curves. His hips widened just slightly, his knees locking into place as they lost all natural bend. His feet small, pointed, dainty, too tiny to properly balance him. Oliver swayed, trying to correct his stance, but his body didn't react the way he wanted. His center of gravity had shifted entirely. His feet were too small, his legs too straight, his waist too cinched. He was toppling forward. The doll-maker caught him, her hands warm but firm, steadying him before he could fall. There, she murmured, her voice light, amused. "You just need a little support, don't you?" She guided him backward, pressing his hands gently to his sides. His arms obeyed without question. Then, with an effortless motion, she turned and retrieved something from the corner of the room. A doll stand. Not just any stand. A life-sized version of the supports collectors used to keep their delicate BJDs upright. A metal ring with an adjustable back brace and a firm base, meant to hold him in place. Oliver tried to pull away, tried to resist, but he couldn't move freely. His legs trembled, his balance ruined, his body too fragile to stand on its own. He felt the cool, unforgiving metal press against his plastic waist, the ring snapping securely around him. The support bar rested against his spine, keeping him upright even as his body refused to hold itself properly. His breath hitched. It was snug, confining, like an inescapable frame locking him in place. The doll-maker adjusted it carefully, stepping back with a soft sigh of satisfaction. "There we go. Much better, don't you think?" She tapped a finger against his nose, giggling. "Dolls can't just go wobbling around on their own. That wouldn't be very elegant, would it?" Oliver wanted to shake his head, to scream, to struggle, but all he could do was stand there, perfectly balanced, perfectly still. She lifted one of his hands, turning it over in her grasp. His delicate fingers remained frozen in place, permanently curved into an elegant, posed position. The only part that could move was his knuckles, allowing his fingers to bend slightly, no more, no less. The doll-maker hummed as she reached for something new, something soft, frilly, and drenched in lace. A dress. Not just any dress. A Lolita dress, pink and white, adorned with delicate bows and ruffled layers. "Oh, this is going to be perfect on you," she cooed, holding the dress up to him, admiring how it framed his shape before slipping it carefully over his head. "A little bow here, a little lace there. You're almost done, almost just right." She turned him toward the mirror, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Now," she whispered, voice soft, adoring. "Look at you." Oliver swallowed, the motion stiff, unnatural. His throat still worked, but there was no saliva, no need to breathe. no organic function left to maintain. His body was a shell, a beautiful, hollow shell. The dollmaker hummed as she reached for something new, something soft, frilly, and drenched in lace. A dress. Not just any dress. A Lolita dress, pink and white, adorned with delicate bows and ruffled layers. Oliver tried to shake his head, to back away, but his body wouldn't move unless guided. His lips parted, but his voice, his words were gone. "Oh, this is going to be perfect on you," she cooed, holding the dress up to him, admiring how it framed his shape before slipping it carefully over his head. A little bow here, a little lace there. You're almost done, almost just right. The dollmaker began dressing him, her motions practiced, methodical. She lifted his arms, he didn't move them himself. They lifted in perfect sync with her guidance. His limbs bent only where they were meant to, each joint sliding smoothly into its assigned position. The fabric draped over his sculpted shoulders, cascading down his reshaped torso, hugging his unnatural waist perfectly. The skirt flared out, full and weightless, settling just above his newly dainty knees. She pulled stockings up his legs, fastening them carefully. Then, with a final delighted giggle, she lifted a pair of chunky, pastel pink Mary Janes, sliding them onto his tiny, fragile feet. He couldn't move. Not really. Not on his own. The mirror reflected a beautiful, life-sized, ball-jointed doll. Her blonde, curly pigtails framed her delicate, painted face. Her sparkling pink eyes were glassy and vacant, shimmering under the soft light. Her lips were glossy, faintly parted, shaped into a soft, permanent pout. Her body was refined, graceful, posed with perfect balance, the Lolita dress hugging her form in all the right ways. Her hands weren't hers anymore. Nothing was. The dollmaker sighed dreamily, tilting her head. Just look at you. So poised, so dainty, so perfect. She leaned in close, her lips brushing just near his ear. And the best part? Oliver felt his breath hitch, though he had no real need to breathe anymore. You'll never have to worry about being anything else ever again. Oliver wanted to scream, to cry, to fight against this horrific perfection, but dolls couldn't scream. They couldn't cry. They only stood there, staring beautifully, vacantly, waiting to be moved. And that's exactly what he was now. The dollmaker beamed, smoothing out his skirt with a gentle touch. Perfect, she sighed. Absolutely perfect. Chapter 6. The final touches. Oliver stood frozen in place, the dollmaker's final whispered words ringing through his hollow body. You'll never have to worry about being anything else ever again. His mind screamed, but his body didn't flinch. It couldn't. His delicate plastic limbs remained poised, held in perfect, effortless balance by the doll stand, keeping him upright. His hands her hands sat permanently sculpted into a soft, elegant pose, fingers curved ever so slightly, as if always prepared to accept a delicate object. A doll's hands, a doll's posture refined, fragile, and forever fixed. The dollmaker stepped back, tilting her head as she admired her work. Almost perfect. Almost? Oliver's chest tightened, a surge of panic flickering through what little was left of his consciousness. Hadn't she already finished? Hadn't she already reshaped him, posed him, dressed him in layers of lace and bows? What else could there possibly be left to take? The dollmaker's gloved fingers reached out, brushing gently along his cheek. Your eyes are lovely now, and that little pout of yours, she giggled, pressing a fingertip against his glossy painted lips. Adorable. But, she turned, moving toward her workbench. The soft clink of glass and the delicate shuffle of brushes made Oliver's heart or whatever was left of it pound. What now? What was she planning? When she returned, she carried an airbrush, fine-tipped paintbrushes, and a bottle of polish. Just a few final touches, she said sweetly, shaking the airbrush. Every doll needs a little something to bring out their personality, don't you think? Oliver couldn't answer. She pressed a button, and a soft burst of air kissed his cheeks. The airbrush whirred gently, releasing a fine mist of rosy blush, painting his face with delicate precision. The sensation was bizarre. He could feel the colour being applied, feel the gentle build of pigment, yet there was no warmth, no true sensation, only the faintest impression of touch. She worked meticulously, misting over his cheekbones, his nose, his chin, refining every delicate feature. He felt the stippled tap of a brush as she dotted freckles along his cheeks, each tiny mark placed with absolute care. a careful, loving touch, as if she were completing a long-awaited masterpiece. Each stroke solidified what he had become, what he would remain, a life-sized, perfect, cherished doll. She hummed to herself as she worked, the gentle, rhythmic strokes of the brush sending waves of realization through Oliver's mind. This was it, the final seal. When she finished, she pulled back, admiring her work with a satisfied sigh. See? Now you have just a bit more charm, a little more character. She tapped the brush against her chin, considering. Actually, one more thing. She reached down, pulling something from the workbench, a tiny pink heart sticker. Oliver wanted to recoil, to thrash, but his limbs stayed perfectly poised as she pressed it onto his cheek with a gentle pat. There, she whispered. Now you're perfect. She wasn't done. Reaching into a small container, she withdrew delicate, pre-painted acrylic nails stiletto-shaped, gleaming with a pink to white gradient and shimmering flecks of glitter. Oliver watched, helpless, as she glued them onto his fingers, one by one. Each new nail felt wrong, too long, too pristine, too delicate. They fit seamlessly against his already doll-like hands, curving in perfect, elegant precision. He could feel them, yet he had no power over them. They belonged to the image she had crafted, not to him. She stepped back, admiring him. Just one last thing. Oliver's thoughts scrambled. No, it's already done. I'm already finished. The dollmaker placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling down at him. She whispered something, a delicate, foreign phrase, her voice carrying an almost sacred reverence. A sharp sensation shot through his limbs. Not pain, something deeper. His body stiffened completely. Oliver's breath caught, or rather, it should have. His chest did not rise. His shoulders did not shift. His fingers, previously capable of slight movement, were now locked entirely in place. Not even his eyes could blink. The dollmaker let out a delighted sigh before stepping forward, wrapping her arms around him in an affectionate embrace. He couldn't return it, couldn't even lean into it. He simply existed in her grasp, an object for her to hold. She pulled back, her violet eyes twinkling. Now let's get you all set up, shall we? Oliver felt himself being lifted, his body weightless in her arms despite its size. She carried him easily, adjusting his limbs with practiced ease, shifting his arms to rest just so, placing his legs into a soft, graceful stance. She carried him toward the front of the shop, where a glass display case stood, already waiting. Inside, a scene was set, a quaint tea party arrangement, complete with a miniature table, delicate porcelain teacups, and other dolls posed as if mid-conversation. Oliver's panic swelled as she positioned him inside the display, nestling him amongst them as if he had always belonged. With careful movements, she arranged his hands, tilting his head just slightly to capture the perfect expression, half-lidded eyes, as if caught mid-sip, lost in an eternal moment of refined elegance. She carefully adjusted his wrist, curling his delicate fingers around a tiny porcelain teacup, his pinky lifted just so, giving the impression of effortless grace. His other hand, placed gently on his lap, was poised in a soft, resting gesture, as if waiting for conversation. The tea party scene around him was a perfect replication of aristocratic charmer miniature round table, draped with lace, adorned with dainty floral teacups, a silver tray of untouched macarons, and a teapot frozen mid-pour, as if the dolls had been caught mid-discussion. Around him, 2 other dolls sat posed in lively engagement, one with her hands gracefully outstretched, the other covering her mouth in a delicate giggle. The illusion was flawless, as though they had all been placed here for eternity, forever locked in an exquisite moment of elegance. Oliver felt it, felt the smooth porcelain between his fingers, felt the artificial stillness of the pose, the weight of his finality settling over him. And then, the dollmaker closed the glass door, a soft click, muted sound, a barrier between him and the world. Oliver stared outward, trapped behind the glass, his own painted expression eternally calm, eternally poised, eternally perfect. The dollmaker pressed her fingertips against the glass, smiling. "You'll be happiest here," she whispered. "No worries, no struggles, just beauty, just stillness." She stepped back, admiring her work one last time before turning away, humming softly as she retreated toward the back of the shop. Oliver was left alone, still, silent, waiting. The final seal had been placed, and he would never move again, not unless she decided to move him.